Well, ladies and gentlemen, an afternoon shot, if you will. But, there's so much to talk about at the moment and some very key stories that, to be frank, I just don't want to miss the opportunity to communicate them to you. But before I get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, just hit the bell icon and subscribe. Anyway, let's get on to the first news story. And there's only really two to talk about. So let's talk about the first one. And this is that the National Security News has highlighted South African news agencies as being compromised. So let's actually go through this and talk about what's actually going on. So lawmakers, both Democrat and Republican, as you know, supported the South African Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025. Now, those same lawmakers have expressed deep concerns that there is allegedly some subversion of freedom of press in South Africa by the state security agency. Now, if you don't know, the state security agency is under the purview of the president. So let's go through this. So these lawmakers have highlighted disturbing cases of whistleblowers being targeted, allegedly in collusion with journalists at News 24. That's controlled by Naspers. Yep, they actually directly reference this. This isn't me, this is actually out of the report. Now, the landmark ruling by the South African Press Ombudsman found that News 24 and its editor-in-chief, Adrian Basson, published disinformation about the SAAR, a farmers' organization, if you will, misrepresenting facts on land rights and delegitimizing critical voices. Now, if you don't recall what that case was about, this is basically the case around expropriation without compensation of the farm that they said they'd fact check, it didn't happen, everybody was lying, and then subsequently turned out that actually it did happen. And so News 24 got the story wrong. Now, the Ombudsman concluded that the reporting included material falsehoods, lacked fairness, ignored correction, and denied individuals the right of reply, amounting to deliberate distortion on sensitive national issues. So in other words, News 24 had basically lied, but on behalf of the government. So going back to the US lawmakers, those individuals criticized News 24's editorial bias, accusing it of sacrificing journalistic integrity to serve the SASSA's led operations. In other words, the state security agency's operations allegedly directed by the Minister of Intelligence under Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, specific instances of hit pieces have been highlighted, and they include the hit piece by News 24 on Rob Hershoff. As you know, Rob Hershoff, the prominent businessman, who recently did a tour around the US, basically highlighting the issues that were occurring in South Africa. And during those, he raised concerns over ANC corruption and Iranian funding. And you will recall that News 24 ran some hit pieces against Rob. They also cited the targeting of the DA's MP, Emma Powell, who exposed misinformation about Jonas, and the State Security Agency allegedly conducted illegal surveillance on her in Washington, and News 24 published a damaging story based on anonymous intelligence leaks about her in order to discredit her. So there are growing calls now in Congress to amend the South African Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025 to include stronger protections for whistleblowers and combat disinformation and ensure media accountability to ensure safeguards in the functioning of our democracy. So effectively what that could mean is that, well, Trump could actually impose sanctions on Adrian Basson and News 24 directly. That's very interesting. Do let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. So now let's move on to our next story of the day. And this is really around the GNU. Now you will recall that the ANC had an NEC meeting, and during that NEC meeting, they really bitched about what they called the chaos of the GNU. And they actually aligned all of the issues with the GNU as being basically the faults of the DA. And they wanted to somehow have a whip that they could beat the DA with. And their whip was, well, to dilute the GNU and expand it to include other parties. Now, this has been led with, well, not exactly the best reception from the existing GNU members for noticeable reasons. So at the time of recording, John Steenhuisen's just addressed the nation, if you want to call it that, and he's given his views on the matter. And he's accused the ANC of planning to expand the GNU And he says that this is a recipe for chaos. He's warning that adding more parties will complicate government and won't make it easier. And currently, the GNU includes around 10 parties, already making it one of the largest coalitions globally. So John Steenhuisen emphasized that the DA and other coalition parties were not consulted about this ANC plan, which shows you that, yet again, the ANC is really just running the country as if they are still the majority. And he stated that we already have 10 parties in the GNU, and we have not been consulted or spoken to about expanding the GNU. And he specifically opposed the inclusion of the MK party led by Jacob Zuma and the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, arguing that this would only heighten political tensions and derails existing functionality. Okay, we get it, John, we get it. So you don't like the idea of this, but this idea that they're going to include the MK party and the EFF is a new one, because last we heard they were only going to include BOSA and Action SA. So does John know something about including the MK party and the EFF that the rest of us don't know? I really don't know where that came from. This must come through with some news that somebody suggested it. I don't know who. In any case, the Freedom Front Plus has publicly rejected the ANC's expansion proposal, stating that all current coalition members must be consulted and must agree before new parties are added. The Freedom Front Plus suggested that the push to expand the GNU was actually a strategy by the ANC to consolidate power amid rising internal instability rather than a move to improve governance. And to that, I would say, I agree. This is very much the ANC attempting to recontrol or retake over control over the state through this GNU. But everybody knew this was going to be the case from like day zero. In any case, we all know that these developments are unfolding against a backdrop of rising strain within the GNU, which includes ongoing conflicts over the budget allocations. We have heard how the budget allocations are going to have to occur after the national dialogue again, which means that there's probably going to be some contention there. And specifically, the DA's refusal to support departmental budgets for ANC ministers accused of corruption, which at this point in time is just freaking all of them. Now, the question still remains, has there actually been an invitation to Zuma's MK party to invite them into the GNU? Because this would seem very controversial. I mean, we all know that Zuma and Ramaphosa don't exactly get on. So has this actually happened? Well, it really is a question I've really got. Like, I'd love to know. In any case, that's the news. Do let me know what you think of it in the comments section below. Has John Steenhuisen just talking out his backside, or has Fikile or someone in the ANC really reached out to the MK party? I'd love to know your comments.